may be odd to talk about an episode from SpongeBob that's from Season 6, knowing full well that that's the season where it went all downhill for SpongeBob for realsies. But considering that there were a few occasions where they have good episodes which are really well defined, and if they're done properly, they're basically SpongeBob from the earlier seasons. But at the same time, whenever I look at this episode, and the fact that I have other alternatives involving reviewing beach episodes from SpongeBob, mainly in the latest seasons where it involves him, Squidward, and Mr. Krabs on a yacht in order to do something. I didn't watch that episode yet, but I did saw images of it and the synopsis of it. This episode actually feels natural to review, considering that it centers around being suntanned, which in all honesty I never talked about before involving beach episodes, especially since that this is the episode where SpongeBob becomes, well, the title described it, sun-bleached. This episode's plot is where SpongeBob and Patrick wants to go to Craig Middleton's party unless they get a suntan. And considering that Craig Middleton, who is a seal that instantly gets a great tan that attracts so many people, I'm starting to convince that Lord the Lobster may have competition, considering that he's a crab who I can guarantee you that crabs won't be able to get tans. Granted, they're also food, but when it comes to tanning, I don't think that's possible for lobsters or crabs. So after Patrick gets a 15-second tan, it's SpongeBob's turn, but Patrick, being Patrick, ignores what he's supposed to do, and then he gets taken by goldfishes in order to go out, since that he has a tan. And once Patrick gets back after 2 hours, we get to see what SpongeBob really is when it comes to sun-bleached. You know, considering that when SpongeBob goes into Sandy's dome, well, he needs water, and without water, he's basically a sponge. I find it difficult to believe that he would end up being like this, all because of a tan for about 2 hours. And also understanding the logic of how SpongeBob works, but what Mr. Miento said in his SpongeBob videos about a decade ago, SpongeBob logic, for good or bad. Since I've watched this episode while it was airing on Nickelodeon during my childhood, I'm gonna be really honest with you, I somewhat enjoyed this episode the most out of the other episodes, and the more I remember it is mainly of how it's really important for someone to get a tan in order to be part of a party. And believe me when I say this, I'm never going to have a tan. In fact, I'm not a beach person despite making these videos. But I can tell that even during Season 6, there were a few ideas that the writers could come up with when it comes to these episodes. About tanning in order to become people like Craig Middleton, and whatever I think about of how Craig Middleton is portrayed in this, and the fact that he also appears as the campers in Camp Coral, it really feels like that the people who designed him had a fun time designing him, and I'm gonna be really honest with you, he's the better designed character compared to the other designed characters from the post-movie era, which isn't saying a lot. Well, he has less to animate compared to the other character designs that I've seen in the other episodes. Granted, there was not much I know about SpongeBob animation, but believe me when I say this, when I see so much from this show, the more you realize that this character has less compared to the other characters. When it comes to SpongeBob's predicament on being sun-bleached, Patrick needs to find ways to give SpongeBob a makeover, and for me personally, it's not really one of the best, but considering that he gave 2 makeovers to SpongeBob, it really feels like that the writers actually knew what they were doing, so they decided to give SpongeBob's second makeover a calmer makeover, which in all honesty, It really shows that even if Patrick is really responsible for SpongeBob being in a tanning situation for so long, it really feels like this is literally the closest we're ever going to see Patrick as likable as possible in the post-movie era, because considering that I can't ignore the moments that he completely ignores SpongeBob and just leaves him in a tanning situation, he wasn't my favorite character getting older for many reasons, and believe me, while Cartoon Crisis 3 is on hiatus, I still have a project involving Patrick. And it's from the pre-movie era, and it's gonna be in comparison in another Nicktoon, which for me personally, both shows have similar episode plots. But less said about that, the better, unless you understand what I mean. So during Craig's party, with the sunbeams on full blast, not really full blast, but it was at the end of the episode, mainly tanning temperatures, with SpongeBob being in coma, he couldn't be able to move. And in all honesty, judging of how that SpongeBob's predicament on being in this situation wasn't entirely his fault, since he didn't come up with the idea of being in coma for the sake of being part of Craig's party. I don't think anyone, even if it's possible, will ever be in coma for the sake of faking that he has a tan, because even if he somehow manages to get inside the party, he would still be in this situation regardless. But after Craig witnessed SpongeBob sun-bleached after the coma was breaking into pieces, he is so amazed, because it's the ultimate suntan. You know, the more I think about it, if any of the other fishes stayed in a tanning situation for about 2 hours, I'm pretty sure they would have been fried as fish food. But considering that SpongeBob is a sponge, and even though my statement earlier on the fact that the logic in this just doesn't make sense most of the time, I'm pretty sure it kind of works for the episode's favor, considering that SpongeBob will probably be the only one that can survive a 2-hour tanning salon compared to everyone else in the Bikini Bottom. When I first saw this ending during my childhood, it was always like every other ending involving SpongeBob, well, bad things happening towards the end, but then the subversion happens and everything turns out good. This ending made me convinced that SpongeBob can do a lot, considering that he's a sponge while everyone else around him are fishes. And believe me, even though that I'm aware that SpongeBob is flawed for the right reasons, while the wrong reasons is mainly how he becomes really annoying, these episodes tried and they managed to succeed, but at the same time they're overshadowed on how bad SpongeBob were. Believe me, I know that there are good moments in this show, mainly the extreme soda bit that Patrick mentioned, which involves live action, which SpongeBob is known for since the beginning. It really feels like that I'm thankful that I'm watching the good episodes rather than the bad episodes, so I was fully aware on watching the bad episodes, including the ones from iCarly. Maybe it really feels like that if you hide your childhood or what you really hate involving cartoons, the more you realize that despite the negativity being overblown, it wasn't too negative when it comes to toxicity. Whenever I look at top 10 or 20 worst SpongeBob episodes, and I don't see this episode anywhere, considering that it was actually a good episode. This episode involving tanning made me understand how much that some episodes in the post-movie era had effort into it. Granted, it didn't do much when it comes to the other bad episodes, but this episode isn't bad, and it's good for making it entertaining. Like, I understand that at the end of the day, SpongeBob is for comedy, but the more you get older, you see more about it that you probably won't be able to witness at a very young age watching this show. So, if you're someone interested into watching good episodes from the post-movie era, this episode's for you. Especially since that if you really want a tan, but not too much of a tan like SpongeBob had in this episode. I'm giving this episode a 7.25 out of 10.